Hello and ho ho ho! Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, uh, Happy New Year coming up soon. My name is Alyssa Claus, and I am here to give out my television awards for 2024 based off of TV shows that I personally watched, and I'm going to give both positive and negative awards. And I will end actually with the worst show of the year. And then that will be counterbalanced in a few days when I will release my top 10 best shows of the year in a whole separate video. So uh, these awards are going to be a little different than what I've done in the past. This is now the fourth year that I've done these awards, and the second year where I've done it all in one video. I used to do a separate video for each one, and I don't have time for that shit anymore. So we're doing um, 5 awards this year. That's the most that I've ever done. It'll go negative, positive, and then end with a negative. But then, and like I said, that'll be counterbalanced by my 10 best uh, video later on. So I'm changing the awards. I have always done the most overrated and the most underrated show. And I'm not doing that this year because there aren't any shows that fit into that category for me. So that's not to say those awards won't come back in 2025 because they might. I just haven't seen anything that I feel is like really ridiculously overrated or that is underrated. So I've replaced those awards with the most disappointing show of the year and the pleasant surprise of the year. So a little different than overrated and underrated. Disappointing show is a show I had high expectations for that didn't live up to them. And then the pleasant surprise is the flip side of that show that I had low expectations for that I really enjoyed. And then I will do 2 other awards. I'll kind of keep you hanging on what those are until I get to them. Um, Unlike the typical awards that I do, where it's like overrated and then underrated, like the opposite, disappointed, and then most pleasant surprise. The other 2 awards that I'll do, one's negative and one's positive, but they have nothing to do with each other. They are in no way related, but you'll see what they are when I get to them. So let us dispense with all the preamble and jump in to my TV awards for 2024. All right, we start with the first award, if you want to call it an award. It's not a good thing, and that is my pick for the most disappointing show of 2024. This is a show I had high expectations for that didn't live up to those expectations. And the winner of this award, to me, is an absolute no-brainer. There were no other competitors. And if you have seen my channel before or seen me over on my siblings' channel, Enchantment of Eternity, you may already know what it is. And here it is, drum roll, most disappointing show of the year is House of the Dragon Season 2. So House of the Dragon Season 1 made it into my top 10 of 2022 as my number one show of 2022, and I gave it a 10 out of 10 rating. And I have read the book, so I knew what storyline is coming up. So I really thought that the season 1 was just getting started, and season 2 was when it was going to be really good. And I already gave it a 10 out of 10, and made it my number one show. So I was like, well, it's going to even be an even better 10 and compete for my number one show again. Um, and it does have a lot to do with I know what the story is. Like I know what's coming. Uh, and so they didn't do as good of a job adapting the material as they did in season 1. And I can tell you just straight out what the one and only reason is that this is the most disappointing show of the year, and that is the finale. That is how the season ended. Um, and I should be clear that I'm comparing this to a 10 out of 10 season from season one. This was an 8 out of 10, so it's still good. I didn't hate it. And in fact, if they had really delivered with the ending of the season, then it's possible that it could have been a 9 out of 10 or even a 10 out of 10 and be right there in the mix in my top five, top three once again. And like it could have been. As it stands now, keeping a running tally of my top 10, this is going to be close. It's either going to just miss my top 10 or will just make my top 10, which is disappointing considering what season one was. Um, so it is the ending that was the most disappointing thing. Um, and what was disappointing about the ending was that there actually isn't one. There isn't an ending. The finale kind of ends mid-story, and they just like cut you off in the middle of the story. Um, and this is different from a cliffhanger. So a cliffhanger is like the most obvious one I think of is the best of both worlds, which was Star Trek: The Next Generation, which ends with um, Captain Picard as a Borg threatening the Enterprise, and Commander Riker going, "Mr. Worf, fire!" And then so it leaves off in the middle of an action sequence, like something big is about to happen, and they leave off and they leave us hanging, and we've got the anticipation. Anticipation is building up because we want to know what happens. Um, that's a cliffhanger. If House of Dragon would have done something similar, like they're in the middle of a battle and we don't see the outcome of it yet, let's say, I mean, I hate to like do an exact metaphor, but let's say that Rhaenyra was on their dragon and she's like, Dracarys! And like you see the flame and then you don't see what happens. That would be a cliffhanger that I could have dealt with. This there was no battle. There was no climax. There was no nothing. there was a, they ended with a montage of all these armies getting ready and people are getting ready to do stuff and marching on things, and they actually showed that ending in the friggin' trailer. And when I saw it in the trailer, I assumed it was going to be the beginning of the episode, and that was going to set us up into great things that were going to happen. But instead, they put that at the end, and we don't get anything. There's also um, no wrap up for any of the character arcs, no wrap up for any of the plots. There's not anything that you can tie together and say, oh, there feels like a nice conclusion to this character story or to this plot that they were doing. There's none of that. And I will admit, it doesn't help that I did read the book and I found like the perfect place in the story from the book where it should have ended. Like it was such a perfect ending. And I said they have to, and I said this many times in like prediction videos I did, they have to end it that way. They have to end it at this certain spot. Um, but instead, they're dragging out the story and saving this what could have been an exciting climax for the beginning of season three. Until there is no exciting climax, there's just nothing. There's no wrap up. There's nothing, and that is extraordinarily disappointing. I still like the season. Earlier on, there were a lot of things that I loved about the season that I also loved from season one. In fact, some things maybe they did better than they did in season one. But because of the lack of ending, it ends up as an 8 out of 10 for me. Um, Barely hanging on into my top 10. You'll have to wait and see if it makes it or not in a few days when I do my top 10 video. Um, and uh, it doesn't anywhere near live up to season one. And I was expecting it to be as good, if not better, than season one. So, House of the Dragon season two, hands down, my most disappointing show of the year. All right, moving onward. I'm ditching the Santa Claus hat. I was getting itchy. Um, I'm not Alyssa Claus anymore. Bah humbug! No, just kidding. Anyways, so we're gonna do the flip side of the previous award. The next award will be the most pleasant surprise of the year. So when I first conceived of these awards, it was after House of Dragon aired. I was like, I'm going to do a most disappointing this year, and then I figured, well, I would do a most pleasant surprise to counterbalance it. And um, my initial thought was, well, it's got to be Lord of the Rings, because whereas House of the Dragon was a big step down from its season one, Lord of the Rings, while not perfect, was certainly better than I was expecting it to be, as it was better than its season one. So that was my initial thought. And then Agatha All Along came out, and I was like, oh, no, no, no. This is definitely the most pleasant surprise of the year, because I was expecting it to be mediocre at best. It was kind of, it's going to be one of those mediocre Marvel shows. I'm not even really that interested in watching it. And then it ends up being something that you will see in my top 10. Let's just put it that way. You'll see it in my top 10. I loved it. So I was like, okay, Agatha All Along is it? Nope. Then another show that I watched after that tops them all. Now, this is a show that was actually streaming, I think, around the same time as Agatha All Along, but I didn't watch it until like just now. I watched it in December. I binged it all after it had finished streaming, and I waited till then because I, didn't think that I would like it, and I figured, well, maybe I could have an overrated show because there's no way I'll like it as much as everyone else does, because everyone else is thinking it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. So I'll just watch the show so that I can have something for my overrated show. And it turns out that's not what happened at all. I ended up loving it, and it becomes my most pleasant surprise of the year over Agatha All Along, over Lord of the Rings, and that show is The Penguin, season one. Now, if you're asking why did you not think you would like this show, I always thought it would be good, blah, blah, blah. For me, I thought I would hate the show because it has two major red marks against it, in my opinion. Number one, it's in the Batman universe. I am totally Batmaned out. I don't need any more Batman in my life. I'm so over Batman. It's a sequel to the movie The Batman, which I thought was okay. I thought it dragged on too long. It was fine. Um, I didn't feel like I needed a sequel to that. I don't feel like I need to see anything in the Batman universe. And then the second big red mark against it is that I heard it was kind of like a Sopranos like show, like a mafia boss gangster show, blah, blah, blah. I don't like that genre. I never have, never will, never been into gangster movies. I have never, ever seen any of the Godfather movies, which is a good thing that I transitioned and I am now presenting as my true female self, because up until then, like, I looked like a real freak, like being a man who's never seen The Godfather, because it's such a bro movie. Like, oh, The Godfather, oh, did you see The Godfather? I'm such a bro, rah, rah, rah. And I never ever have seen it because I don't like that genre. So, and I've never watched Sopranos either. I don't like that genre. So a Batman movie or a Batman show, that's also a mafia show. That sounds like my worst nightmare. And then everyone was saying it's the greatest thing they've ever seen. So again, yeah, I said, well, let me give it a shot, because if nothing else, I can have an overrated show of the year. I ended up loving it. Um, so the red marks against it weren't really red marks against it, because though it is set in the Batman universe, it is set in Gotham City. Batman is only mentioned at the very, very beginning of episode one, just to kind of tie it into the universe, to show you where it fits in. It comes right after the ending of that Batman movie, and they like mention Batman, and then at the very, 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 very end of the show, you see the bat signal come up, and that is it. That is it. Batman is never mentioned any other time. We get Selena Kyle, the Catwoman, name dropped in the finale as well. But other than that, like, it has nothing to do with Batman, and it feels like its own separate thing. You do know in the back of your mind that this is basically the origin story for the Penguin, who's a Batman villain, but they're not beating you over the head with it. They're not like there's no like hey, look it's Batman. Oh, it's Bruce Wayne. Like they don't. I don't even think they mentioned Commissioner Gordon or anything. Um, so that was good. And then as far as the mafia aspect of it, yeah, it is kind of a gangster mafia war type of thing. Um, but what really kind of I think makes it good for me is the characters. I was really into the characters more so than I tend to be in any of the other like mafia type stuff that I've watched before. And it has a lot to do with the acting. Of course, Colin Farrell is amazing as the Penguin. Um, he is the anti-hero, and um, it's one of those shows where um, your hero is a total piece of shit, much like a Breaking Bad type of thing. And I think they did a really good job with this anti-hero. And the fact, a lot of times, they do a good job getting your empathy for this character. They show from his point of view, so you sometimes find yourself even rooting for him a little bit, and then he reminds you, oh yeah, he's a piece of shit. And then at the very, very end of it, not to spoil anything, I'm doing all spoiler free. I forgot to mention that there's no spoilers on this. Um, but at the very, very end of this, um, he does something really horrendous where you're like, oh right, he's a Batman villain. I forgot. Yeah, that's right. I shouldn't be rooting for him at all. He's a Batman villain. Um, but anytime, yeah, you might get a little bit too much empathy for him. They pull you back in and go, oh yeah, he's a Batman villain. And so um, they do a really, really good job with that. But I think for me, the show stealer um, is the character of Sophia Falcone, who's the daughter of the Falcone dude who was killed at the end of the Batman movie, big gangster guy. And I meant to look up the actress's name before I did this video, but I forgot to. And I did look it up before, and I never heard of her before. But I will get to know her name, and I will keep an eye on her because she was amazing. She was the show stealer for me. This character, I think, is why I love the show so much because you have even more empathy for her. She's an anti hero, but comes very, very close to being a hero hero. I would say, like, kind of all along the lines of Daenerys Targaryen from Game of Thrones pre season 8, before she spontaneously started killing children. That kind of along those lines, but not quite because with her too, you are reminded, oh yeah, no, she's not a very good person. Like, so she's not really a hero, but you have a lot of empathy for her, and the character was really interesting with a really interesting backstory. In fact, episode 4 was her centric episode, and that's my favorite episode of the season. Um, so she was the show stealer for me. I think she's why I love this show so much. Colin Farrell is good too, but like she deserves an award, like a legitimate award, like an Emmy, or I don't know if they were nominated for Golden Globes. I don't pay attention to that shit, but regardless of whether I pay attention, she deserves one of them because she is so good, and just so well written. Such well written characters, a lot of complexity in the storytelling. Um, that really got me. So I ended up loving it, and you will see me talk about it again in my top 10 because it's definitely in my top 10. So stay tuned for that. Now, let me move on to my mystery awards. I didn't tell you about them yet, although I'm going to put timestamps in the description below. So if you want to see what they are, you can just click on the timestamps. But um, let me go and move to my next award. Okay, and now we move into my next new award, and you can already see what it is. It is the Franchise Fatigue Award for 2024. So this is something that I wouldn't do every year, maybe every couple years, and um, I would say for this Franchise Fatigue Award, 2024 was kind of the tipping point, but I was already experiencing franchise fatigue before this. Um, before I reveal what it is, I'm going to talk about like the predecessor to this award. I would have given and 2 years ago, if I had done this in 2022, I would have given this to the MCU. And I did a review for the Black Panther or Wakanda Forever movie, and I was like, I'm just getting so tired of mediocre project after mediocre project after mediocre project. I could do that all day. Not to um, do a pun there, no pun intended, from Captain America, but um, yeah, and that's how I felt toward the end of 2022. And then 2023, we got Loki season two, we got What If season two, 2023, 4, we got Deadpool and Wolverine, we got Agatha All Along, and also X-Men 97, which, I mean, it's technically not MCU, but it is MCU. But, all that stuff was excellent. So, and also, they weren't just cranking out one project after the other. They're kind of giving it more space between each project. So I don't feel that franchise fatigue anymore for the MCU, though it certainly could come back, but I'm not feeling it right now. Um, there's another franchise that I feel like it's mediocre project after mediocre project after mediocre project, and they've been doing this for a few years now, but it's really just coming to an head in 2024, and I just like can't take it anymore, even though I'm going to keep watching this franchise. So, anyway, the Franchise Fatigue Award for 2024, if you haven't guessed already, is Star Wars. Oh, Star Wars. At this point, it just feels like I'm watching Star Wars out of an obligation because I first saw the movie when I was 3 years old, and I have all this nostalgia for it, and the movies were a part of my identity and who I was, and like I grew up on them, and they're in my heart and in my soul. So I feel like obligated to watch things that have the word Star Wars in them, and I can't quit it. I can't quit it. But and it's they're not terrible is the thing. Like if everything was terrible, then it'd be easier to quit it, regardless of my nostalgia. But the thing is, like they're fine. Like, that's the problem. It's not that they're bad; they're fine. But it just gets so old. Mediocre project after mediocre project. So we go back to few years ago, actually, The Mandalorian. Before I get into 2024, just getting a little bit of the history. The Mandalorian has had 3 seasons. I personally think all 3 seasons were mediocre. I know a lot of people were really trashing season 3. I thought I agreed with all those people trashing season 3, but I thought it was equivalent to seasons 1 and 2. I thought seasons 1 and 2 were vastly overrated. They just did the freaking Seventh Samurai plot like a billion times. And it was not good. It was fine, but it wasn't amazing. So all 3 seasons of The Mandalorian. Ahsoka, I had really high hopes for, and there were 2 episodes of Ahsoka that were really fantastic, but then kind of fell off in the end. Um, and then Andor, which is a show that everyone else thinks is the greatest thing since sliced bread, which I think is vastly overrated. It's mediocre in a different way than The Mandalorian and the Mandoverse shows are. Or the Mandoverse shows, they do this really obnoxious thing where where they have a really interesting story that they could tell, like some lore of the Mandalorians or something like that, something that comes from the Clone Wars or Rebels, something they could really dive into. But instead, they do this stupid Scooby Doo side plot where Christopher Lloyd is a Scooby Doo villain, and Jack Black and Lizzo are in it, and it has nothing to do with the interesting stuff. And then they throw an interesting thing at the very, very end for like 2 minutes. and that is a type of thing that the Mandiverse has done a bunch. Andor doesn't do that. Andor, the reason why I think it's overrated is because it was a 12 episode show that should have been 6. Like I wish I could get that script with just take a red mark and just scratch up all these characters. The dude who was staring at the blue milk should not exist. So Andor, overrated show. So just to me, it just fits into the mediocrity of Star Wars. And there was good stuff in Andor too, which is why it's not terrible. It's mediocre. So now that would leads us into 2024. First thing we get is the Bad Batch season 3. This was a huge disappointment because Bad Batch season 2, at the end of the season, especially the Crosshair episode, I think was fucking fantastic. It reminded me of the Clone Wars era. Like, it reminded me of a Clone Wars episode. Like, it was dark, but it was complex and it had a lot to say. And so with season 2, ending on a high note, I thought season 3 could also go back to the Clone Wars days and give me something that made the Clone Wars so good when it was good. Um, Clone Wars overall was up and down, but ended on a fantastic note. So I had that expectation that Bad Batch could too, and although House of the Dragon still easily beats it out for most disappointing show, it was also disappointing um, because it just had this happy dappy, everybody loves each other, everybody uses wonderful, happy ending, and that's wasn't complex at all, wasn't interesting, wasn't it was boring, and back to mediocrity. Um, I think the frustrating thing is when shows like this and The Mandalorian have its roots in the Clone Wars, and they're not as good as that. And because the Clone Wars was pre-Disney, basically since Disney took over Star Wars, it's been crap, or not crap. It's been mediocre. And then we get Tales from the Empire, which I had hopes for. They were focusing on Asajj Ventress and what's her name? Barrister So not Barrister Soulmate. What's that chick's name? Whatever her name is. um, yeah, focusing on those characters. It wasn't as good as I was hoping it would be because again, um, the Disney era Star Wars is taking stuff from the Clone Wars, but not making it into something mediocre. And so, Tales from the Empire. Honestly, I couldn't even remember what any of the stories about because they made no impression on me. They were just kind of like, ugh. Um, and then, of course, we had the Acolyte, which I don't think it's as horrible as some of these bad faith actors making it out to be because it's woke and it has lesbians in it and it's the worst thing ever. Screw all those people. Anyone who watched the show in good faith, though, I think is pretty common to say is fine. Like, there's some things that are good about it, but it's just fine. It's okay. It's fine. Um, and then at the end of the year, we had the Skeleton Crew, um, which I really didn't want to watch. But again, because it has the word Star Wars in it, like I feel like I'm missing out on something if I don't at least give it a chance and watch it. And as of this recording, it isn't finished yet, so it's actually not eligible for my 2024 top 10 because it won't be completed until 2025. So there is still, I think, a path for the Skeleton Crew to end up being a little bit better than some of the other Star Wars show. But based on what I've seen, 5 episodes of no, it was 4 or 5. Yeah, 5 episodes I think I've seen so far, and based off of that, yeah, it could end up being yeah, I think this better than the other Star Wars. But there's no path to greatness. There's no path to oh my god, this is an objectively amazing show. Taking the Star Wars out of it, this is one of the best shows I've ever seen. There's no way that that will happen. Um, I find the story concept interesting, the mystery that they're presenting interesting. I find the characters boring. I think that the characters are the Timu Goonies. This is basically, you don't get the reference. Timu is like, an app that you can order knockoff clothing that is really, really cheap, but you get it and it's like a knockoff of the original. They're the Goonies. They're the Timu Goonies because they're like knockoffs. Anyways, I don't find them very interesting. I don't care about these characters. It's just, but there are good things about it. Like the story is interesting. So it's again, it's maddening that they give you a glimmer of things that are good, but then it's just not great. It just ends up being mediocre. And Skeleton Crew already has had a couple episodes that follows that same Mandalorian format where uh, they're doing there's something they could do that would be really interesting if they dove into the lore, they dove into the mystery, if they really spent a whole episode on that, it would be good. But instead, it's some stupid side quest that is cliche that I've seen a gazillion times that is boring and I don't care about. And then they do the important thing in the last 2 minutes of the episode. And this is just something that I think the Mandoverse is just always going to do. And I just have to accept this is Star Wars now. This is what Star Wars is. Uh, I had this false expectation that Mandalorian season 3, going back to last year, or was that 2 years ago? Whenever that was, I think it was last year. And this false expectation that this will be different, that this will really dive into the Mandalorian lore like the Clone Wars used to, but it wasn't. And I've given up hope that anything's ever going to change with Disney Star Wars. This is what it is. It's going to have cliche side quests. It's going to have the Seventh Samurai story over and over, and then the interesting stuff maybe they'll slip in for a minute. Um, so yeah, this is Disney Star Wars, and it's like this endless cycle of mediocrity that I feel like I can't escape from. And I should just stop watching it, but I just can't because it's Star Wars, and it's not terrible. That's the thing. There's things in it that was like, oh, that's good. And every single show I mentioned, The Mandalorian, Andor, even Skeleton Crew, every single one, there's something in there that's like, oh, that's good, but then it just falls short, and it's like mediocre project after mediocre project, and they just cranking them, mediocre, over and over and over and over and over and over. And this is what the MCU used to be. This is now what Star Wars is, and I feel trapped in it. I'm trapped in it. Uh, we'll see if that changes in 2025. It won't. I can tell you right now, it won't. Um, but so that is it. I'm done talking about the franchise fatigue. I'm fatigued of talking about franchise fatigue for Star Wars. So I am going to move on to another new award, and I could have done the flip side of this and been like my favorite franchise, but quite frankly, that's just always going to be Star Trek. Like, it's just always going to be Star Trek. So it's either going to be Star Trek every year or nothing. It'll be nothing. Like, so I didn't want to do that. There's another award that I wanted to do, um, something positive, that I've been wanting to do for a while, but it is in no way related to the franchise fatigue. It's just a completely different thing, has nothing to do with anything, but brings joy to my heart. So I wanted to do it. So let's move on to that one. All right, welcome to my next positive award. And again, you can already see it on the screen. It is the Queer Show of the Year. Da, 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 da. I really wanted to do this. I've been thinking about this for a couple of years, and this is the first time I want to celebrate queerness. I want to celebrate LGBTQ representation, and I want to talk about my personal favorite queer show of the year. Um, and I actually want to just quickly give this award out retroactively the last 2 years. So let me go back to 2022, where the Queer Show of the Year would have been League of Their Own. And as I said at the time when I did my top 10, If you haven't seen A League of Their Own, forget about the Tom Hanks movie. Forget about No Crying in Baseball. Although they do give a shout out, a call out to that line, it has nothing to do with that. It is basically about what it's like to be gay and lesbian. Mostly lesbians is the main focus in the 1940s, where it was basically illegal to be uh, lesbian, and that's a little scary because we might be heading back in that direction. We're heading down a dark path now, um, but it was still different then, and it gives you a lot of insight, um, and it also focuses on African American culture and African American gay culture, and even has a trans man, which, of course, we know trans people have existed since the dawn of time. We don't get enough representation of them in previous times. So loved that show. It was also a good comedy too. It dealt with some heavy topics, but also was really funny, and it was really well acted. So League of Their Own, going back to 2022, would be my queer show of the year. Now for 2023, my queer show of the year would have been Our Flag Means Death season 2. So season 1 came out in 2022, same year as League of Their Own, but season 1 was um, kind of dipping its toes in the queer waters. But in season 2, they just went all in on the queer. There is a fantastic scene where the guy who plays Hodor comes out as a drag queen, and it was fantastic. And they just, I know people have mixed feelings about Taika Waititi, but he does a great job with this show. It's probably my favorite thing that he's done in a while. And the queer relationships. There's the main one between our main characters, but then there's like almost every other relationship in season 2 is queer. There's like, I think, one or two heterosexual romances happening, but most of them are queer, and they just really go all in. And for my money, season 2 far outweighs season 1. I know some people were saying, "Oh, it wasn't as good as season 1," which I think is objectively wrong. I think it was just better storytelling, more queer, and they didn't get bogged down on the stupid Monty Python like dysfunctional pirate thing that they did in the beginning of season 1. So I loved it. It is a shame that it got canceled, so I can't have it as a repeat for Queer Show of the Year. Now we move forward to 2024, where we are right now, um, where I can give my award for this year for the Queer Show of the Year. And my Queer Show of the Year for 2024 is Heartstopper Season 3. And this is maybe a little bit of a Lifetime Achievement Award, because it has had 3 seasons. The first season came in 2022, the second in 2023, and I didn't watch either of them when they first started streaming. I binged all 3 seasons in 2024. And I had always heard about this show because if you follow any LGBTQ social media at all, that's all anyone talks about was this show. And watch it because it's presented as kind of a teen drama romance, or kind of a teen rom-com, and that's just not really interesting to me, whether it's heterosexual or or whether it's LGBTQ. Not typically my genre, so I didn't really watch it. But then I saw Agatha all along, and was introduced to an actor by the name of Joe Locke, and he was incredible. And I found out, well, that's the dude from Heartstopper. So after Agatha All Along finished, I was like, okay, I'll go back and binge Heartstopper, and I quite enjoyed it a lot. Um, I would say, unfortunately, the season 3 is probably my least favorite of the 3, and that's the one that's in 2024. So that's why it's kind of a little bit of a lifetime of achievement award, um, because I do think it was better in 2022 and 2023. I just didn't watch it then, um, and I think the reason why season 3 maybe falters a little bit, is that they kind of run out of story for our 2 main characters, Joe Luck's character and his love interest, where they're the first two seasons, they're really kind of building up their romance, and it builds and builds. And they didn't really have as much to do in season three, so they resorted to uh, this very special episode story arc that actually lasted over several episodes. If you don't know what I mean by the very special episode, it's a thing they did in the 80s for sitcoms where they would say, we're having a very special episode, and it would be something that like tackles an important issue, like a touchy issue. Like they did eating disorders a bunch, they did child abuse, and they did sexual abuse. I remember there was a Different Strokes episode where the guy plays the dad comes out and like, you should watch this together with your kids. This is a very sensitive topic, and it was like, sexual abuse. And for me as a kid, those were actually really good because those actually I learned a lot of things that I wouldn't have learned otherwise from these sitcoms. So I'm not knocking it as a concept in the 80s for kids, but I'm an adult now. And the topic they did was eating disorder, and they spent a lot of time on it, and I wasn't as interested in it. However, it is still the queer show of the year because while the main storyline with our Joe Locke and his love interest, the main characters, took a little bit of a dive, they did elevate some of the other characters quite a bit, including the trans character whose name is Elle. And I've always appreciated how they've handled this character. Like they didn't overemphasize her transness. In fact, I don't think they even mentioned that she's trans until season two. You just kind of go, "Oh yeah, she's trans." Like you just pick up on the subtle clues. But it is still following her journey. But then in season three, they just dive head on in her transition. She gets a pretty big storyline where she's dealing with a more subtle transphobia, where it's not quite the God hates you and blah 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 and stay out of the bathroom and all that stuff, but uh, the stuff that maybe cis people wouldn't immediately recognize as transphobia, but us trans people feel it. So she's dealing with that, and she has a storyline where she's hesitant to tell her cis boyfriend or tell any of her cis friends because she's like, "There's no way they understand. Like, you don't understand us." I feel that. Sorry, I'm hitting my microphone, but I feel that viscerally. Um, that feeling of if you're not trans, um, you won't really understand what this is like, and we have cis friends that, and for me personally, like I still feel very very supported, and I still feel like I can go to my cis friends, some of my cis friends, with anything, but I get that feeling of like they can't experience it the way that we do, like they can't quite ever understand it the way that we do. And so she's going through this storyline, and that to me was fantastic. Even if the show overall maybe takes a little bit of a dip from seasons one and two, um, I still loved this show so much. It's overall the show is just like this is the feel good because it could be the feel good show of the year, and it's a show that has a lot of different romances in it, but they manage for the most part to avoid stupid rom com tropes, and they have characters who communicate with each other. There's no like comic misunderstanding or anything like that. Like these are characters who have healthy relationships and healthy friendships. There's a lot of really good, healthy friendships in this show. But you know what? Just because there's a healthy friendship or a healthy relationship doesn't mean that there isn't conflict and there isn't drama. I love that they are able to show healthy relationships and healthy friendships and still make it interesting, still have drama, because that's how it is in real life. Not everything has to have a comic misunderstanding or characters not talking to each other, and if they just like would just talk to each other, the whole problem would be solved. Like those tropes that they do on shows over and over again, they avoid that for the most part. So I think it's a really fun feel good show overall, and the queerness that they do with the trans character in particular in 2024 is excellent. So Heartstopper is my queer show of the year. And now we can conclude this awards video with the worst show of the year, by my opinion. And this, of course, will be balanced out by my top 10 best shows of the year, which will be in a separate video in a few days. So, this is one that I have done since 2021. And I will say that last year's pick for worst of the year at the time was the best worst show of the year because 2021 I picked The Nevers, which is Joss Whedon's disaster of a show. I gave a 1 out of 10 to it. In 2022, I almost don't even want to mention this show because I want to block it from my memory. But there was Picard season 2, which I gave a 1 out of 10 for as well. And then 2023 was Secret Invasion, which I gave a 4 out of 10 to. So at that time, it was the best worst show of the year because it got a whopping 4 out of 10. This year, my worst show of the year is a show that I gave a 5 out of 10 to. So it is now the best worst show of the year I've ever done. But I still feel like it's something that I'm going to do every year. Even if I end up, my worst show ends up being a 6 out of 10. Whatever my least favorite show was, regardless of how highly ranked I have it, if my worst show of the year is a 7 out of 10, then it's still the worst show of the year. But this year is a 5 out of 10 rating, and that is the lowest rating I gave to any show in 2024. And although I must say that I am recording this prior to the conclusion of What If Season 3. At this point, What If Season 3 has finished 4 episodes. They're doing it daily between the 22nd and the 29th. So it is not eligible for this video, though it will be eligible for my top 10 video. It'll be mentioned in there at least. But so far, like, it could actually challenge for the worst show of the year. That Howard the Duck episode, I want to erase that from my memory. That was torture, like sitting through that episode. I'll do a written review for it on my Facebook page, so follow me on Facebook. But I assume What If's going to get better because we're going to get back to the lore about the Watcher and Peggy Carter and Cohoris, the character they introduced last year. So I assume it'll get better. So hopefully not. Hopefully it's not a retroactive worst show of the year because I can't count it right now because it's not finished. So I can only go by what I have seen. And well, this is a long preamble to reveal to you what my worst show of the year actually is. So the worst show of the year with a 5 out of 10 rating in 2024 is Three Body Problem Season 1. This is a show that was recommended to me by a couple of my subscribers only because they had read the book and thought the book was excellent, not because they had seen the show yet at the point that they were recommending it to me. This is the latest project of Dan and Dave from Game of Thrones infamy, the men who always go down in history as ruining Game of Thrones. So this show, it did have an interesting take on an old trope, which is the alien invasion trope. It's funny that 2 years in a row, alien invasion shows are my worst show of the year for different reasons. It has a really unique take on it, and I can see how people would really like the book because they take really unique, innovative things from the book. And a lot of the story was really interesting to me. Although they do, at the end of the season, they throw in some cliche things like everybody looking up and seeing a big alien spaceship coming down, which is like very cliche. But for the most part, the way they handle this trope is very different and creative and inventive and unique. So I can see why people would have liked the book. The problem with the show is that it doesn't actually have any characters. Oh no, it has several people posing as characters, but they're not characters. They are walking and talking plot devices whose only purpose is to move the plot forward at all costs. And that's a cost to personality, that's a cost to interest. I don't care about any of these characters at all. When I think about these characters, I think of the joke from the pitch meeting if you know my channel, you know I watch the pitch meeting a lot from Ryan George. If you don't watch it, you should definitely go watch the pitch meeting. Um, but there's a recurring joke that he does where they'll say something about a character. So here, I'll give you an example. I'll throw a picture of a character from this show. Um, so, oh, what's his deal? Well, he's just skeptical about everything. Oh yeah, what else? I just told you, he's just skeptical about everything. like, like he's just a one-note character, and every character is like that. They just have one characteristic. Every character is like that. Here's another one. What's her deal? Oh, she's just emo and she's just moody and in a bad mood all the time. What else? I just told you. Like it's one note characters. That's what these characters are. One more. I got one more. I could do this for every single character in the show. It's true of every character in the show. Um, but I'll do one more. Oh, hey, what's his deal? He has cancer. What else? I just told you he has cancer. Actually, no, to be fair, this guy also has an obsession with another character, a crush on her, and he doesn't want to tell her. So he's got two. He's got two characteristics. This is a really complex character for this show. Two characteristics. This kind of writing drives me insane, and I don't hold it against any of the actors. In fact, it's really disappointing because Rosalind Chow appears in the show, and she has a near and dear place in my heart because she was Keiko O'Brien from Star Trek: The Next Generation and Star Trek: Deep Space Nine, and she also plays a one-note character. It's just like it's not the actor's fault. This is like the writing is terrible, the directing is terrible. It's just uh, it's just so bad. You have to develop your characters, or it's just I lose interest. And then there's a scene in the penultimate episode of this season where I can tell the Dan and Dave and the people making the directors, whoever, are expecting me to feel some emotion. Like they're expecting it to be. They think they're putting out a really emotional scene where we're going to be crying, but I felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. Actually, no, that's not true. I felt boredom, but I could tell that they thought they were going to make me cry or whatever. And the reason why it didn't elicit that emotional response is I don't give a fuck about this character who has one characteristic. I don't feel like I know them. I don't. They seem like a walking, talking plot device rather than a human being. It doesn't feel like a real human being to me. So when you try to do this really sad thing and think that it's going to make me cry, I feel nothing. I would feel no different than if you just drew a triangle on a piece of paper and said something bad happens to this triangle. I would be like, okay, it's just a triangle. Like that you just drew on a piece of paper. Why would I feel anything for that? Same thing. This is not a three-dimensional being. This is not a human being. This is a cardboard cutout character that you want me to feel something for, and I just can't. I just can't. Um, there is actually a this was the novel that this was written based off of, rather, is a Chinese novel, and I saw on Amazon there's a Chinese version of this show. And just reading the synopsis, it looks very, very, very different, probably closer to the book. And I was kind of curious to check it out, but this show gave me such a bad taste in my mouth about this story that I kind of don't want to watch it. So, so I haven't ever watched it. But I'm sure it's probably better because this is I gave it a 5 out of 10 instead of anything below that because of the story. The story is interesting. It is unique. It is inventive. It is creative. So that's why it reaches the plateau of a 5 out of 10 rather than a 4 like Secret Invasion, which didn't have a good story, or a 1 like the disasters from 2021 and 2022 for my worst shows of the year. So it does get a 5, but because of the uh, terrible character development, it is my worst show of 2020, 2024. So let me try that again. Because of the bad character development, Three Body Problem Season 1 is my worst show of 2024. Alrighty, that wraps things up for this video. Hope you enjoyed my awards. Hope you will come and join me um, around New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. I'm not quite sure when I'm going to be able to get this video out. Not only do I have to wait for What If to finish this run, but Squid Game Season 2 is dropping all at once on the 26th, and I'm going to be out of town and from the 26th to the 28th, so I won't be able to start watching it till the 28th, and I definitely want to watch that whole thing and consider it to see at least if it's eligible for my top 10 or not. Um, or no, it is eligible to see if it makes my top 10 or not, I should say. So it's a tight timeline, so I don't know if it'll be out New Year's Eve or New Year's Day or even January 2nd. So we'll see about that. But subscribe to my channel if you have not already. And you can also follow me on Facebook for the latest updates at Alyssa Jean's Review. So I will see you all there. Merry Christmas, everyone. See you soon.